Hello and welcome to the Cleveland International Film Festival Film Slam Stream's post-film conversation for Mariposas. My name is Eric Siler, Professor of Communication, Film, and Media Arts, as well as moderator for this conversation. We are pleased to be joined by the director of the film, Adrian Carey. Adrian is an award-winning filmmaker dedicated to films that challenge viewers' conceptions of reality. He's a graduate of NYU's Tisch School. Adrian currently lives and works remotely in Brooklyn, New York, where he continues to make films in quarantine. He enjoys being out in nature whenever possible. Adrian, thank you for joining us from Brooklyn, New York today.
Thank you so much for hosting me, Eric. I really appreciate it. And thank you again to Beth, as you said, from Film Slam. Always lovely to be a part of these conversations.
Well, it's so good to have you. Very interesting film. A lot you packed in such a short period of time. Can you tell us what inspired you to make this film? Were you out in nature one day and decided, hey, I need to make a film?
Sure. No, thank you for the kind words. Actually, funny enough, I ended up living in California with a roommate who was Tibetan, and he had a policy in our house of we weren't allowed to kill insects. And it's funny, it's just like a small switch change of thinking, but it really transformed my ideas of how I interconnected with nature and, the critters in my house. And so it kind of caught fire, and now I, always take all the insects out, and yeah, it really inspired this film.
Interesting. Well, why the butterfly in particular? It could have been any insect, but why the butterfly?
Sure. The butterfly holds a lot of interesting meaning throughout different religions. It's usually, as you know, a sign of transformation and growth in person. So I think it holds a special meaning in this context as we're kind of interrelating it to, in this magical realist universe of this could be someone's daughter kind of idea.
Interesting. Now, getting into the film, let's try to break it down. There's obviously additional meaning to the film beyond the butterflies that we see in the film. Can you take us through your interpretation of the film?
Absolutely. Yes. So in magical realism, it's our universe, but the laws of the universe are slightly different. So in terms of like what exactly happens, it's kind of just a concession of the world that for whatever reason on this day in this world, all the kids in the school turned into butterflies. And from that, the narrative kind of unfolds in a way where it introduces, I think, a lot of interesting ideas of reincarnation and also of how humans are interconnected with nature. Yeah, that's what I got.
Interesting. So you make the connection between children and butterflies, and they happen to turn into butterflies that specific day. Was there a reason why it happened that day? Maybe because the fathers were picking up the children and not the mothers? Or is there any reason beyond that?
It's a great question, and kind of the way it's left open-ended, I think, allows you to kind of interpret those things for yourself. That one of the most special parts of the film for me is that I've heard so many different interpretations of it beyond even what I, necessarily intended, which I think is like a really wonderful thing that no matter where you're from or what you believe in, you can find something true in this narrative that applies to you.
Interesting. And I just want to make a note. I'll say this for you. No butterflies are actually harmed during the making of this film. Is that correct?
That is correct. Our friends were not harmed. Interestingly enough, the only butterfly that you see gets its wing torn was already dead. I didn't kill it. It's from like the pinups. If you see them when they like pin the butterflies in these shadow boxes, I ended up purchasing a butterfly from there. But no, all the live butterflies were our friends, and we released them, and we're very grateful for their time.
Yeah, you did such a marvelous job of integrating live butterflies and the animated butterflies. Can you tell us a little bit about that process, how you actually integrated them and what scenes held the animated and the real butterflies?
Absolutely. Yes. No, thank you. It's a great question. So part of my idea with butterflies is animation and video effects is often what takes the most amount of your time, and especially in these kind of contexts. So for a one-day shoot of what this film was, it took me about 1.5 years of post-production. So in terms of butterflies, I wanted to minimize what the scope of the work was to begin with. my idea behind it was that if I could sell you the first butterfly as being a real butterfly, your mind would be more willing to accept the other butterflies as real. So the first butterfly you see on his shoulder is like actually a real butterfly. And it's funny, like you could never, in leading up to production, I had this idea of I'm going to have a butterfly land on this guy's shoulder, which is like, you can't, I couldn't coach the butterfly. So it was like a really interesting process of just kind of trusting in the universe. And funny enough, we released this butterfly, and the margin of error for the focus is about 1/2 of an inch. And this butterfly flew and hit its mark. And that was the take that we used. It was maybe the second or third take. So that was the real butterfly. And then everything else is digitally created. We had a really nice video effects guy, Pete Polyakov, very, very talented. And then my buddy, Alex Sherman, also helped with compositing. And between the three of us, we were able to get it done, but it took quite a while.
I can imagine. Now, you said the real butterfly landed on his shoulder. How did you get the butterfly to actually do that?
I wish I could tell you. Yeah, honest. I was just like, all right, we're going to try a few takes of just releasing the butterfly and hoping it does what I hope it does. And for some reason it did. But yeah, it was really just luck, Ernest.
Now, well, when working with the real butterfly, did you have any experience in working with butterflies? Did you hire someone who's familiar with butterflies? How did that process work?
Great question. Thank you. No, it's we didn't necessarily have a butterfly wrangler on set, but our art department and us were very, very careful. And the way that I did it is sometimes for weddings, you'll order butterflies in the mail. And interestingly enough, what they do is they freeze the butterflies, which doesn't hurt the butterflies, but puts them into like a sleep state. And then they put them in envelopes. And so they sent me a box of maybe like 11 envelopes on ice. And so we held on to those until shooting time. And then when you thaw your butterflies, it, like you're waking up in the morning for any of us, takes a little bit of time to readjust. So we gave them like some time to have their coffee. And then in about 20 minutes, they were ready to go.
Interesting. Wow. And did you know this before you started shooting the film, that about the butterfly, this process with the butterfly?
No, it was all news to me. As as you dive into any creative pursuit, it always, I learned and learned and learned new things, which was so wonderful. But yeah, this is just a part of that process.
Interesting. Wow. And you indicated it took about 1.5 years to edit. How long did it take for you to complete the film?
It was nearly 2 years, all said and done. Production again was like a day, but the video effects needs are such that it was very intensive to really get it to look as nice as we wanted it to. And so also as an editor, I probably edited this film 100 different ways, which is kind of interesting considering it's only 3 minutes total runtime. So it took a good amount of time. There's a lot left on the cutting room floor, but at the end of the day, I think we found something pretty special.
So well, what was left on the cutting room floor?
Originally, there was a lot more dialogue. There's like maybe even a scene or two inside of the school. But at the end of the day, when we started playing around with it, the pacing of it just felt like we didn't need as many lines. We didn't need as much pretext, didn't need as much situating. So it flowed really well without that material, but took a while to find it.
Good information. I just want to remind our audience that we're about halfway through our conversation with Adrian Carey, director of Mariposas. And please submit your questions in the portal and I'll get to them as time allows. Now the title of the film, Mariposas, why did you choose that? That translates into butterflies in the Spanish language. Why did you choose that as a title?
It's a great question. Thank you. It's actually a short film based on a short story by an Argentinian author named Samantha Schweblin. And I read her piece a few years ago and just fell in love with it. And it is Mariposas titled. So it felt fitting that to honor her and her work in creating this idea, that the film, of course, would hold on to the name.
Okay, that's a good bit of history there. One question we have come in. The butterfly that had the broken wing, was that a real butterfly or a fake butterfly?
That was a real butterfly, and that would be from the shadow box, where these butterflies are, I think, killed with alcohol, but then they're mostly used for that pinup art. So we didn't kill it, but that was a real butterfly, and we did rip its wing. And then we gave it a nice burial and thanked it for its service.
Okay, very nice, very nice. All right, my next question, I'll keep the questions coming,
Great.
folks. Next question I have for you is, how was the film received by the viewers? What do people think of the film?
Sure. I think every time, and I miss screening in front of audiences because you really get the visceral reaction of how people feel about it. But one of the very special experiences from last year's Film Slam was that I got to see it so many times with so many different audiences, and the reactions really vary. Sometimes people are a little averse to the concept, and then other times you can tell when people really click and jive with the idea. And I think either way is okay. It's meant I like that it will leave people thinking about it after it's left. And I think that's been the real big takeaway, is that whether they loved it or hated it, I think audiences definitely thought about it once or twice after they left the theater.
Well, good, very good. Another question we have coming in is, how did you find your actors and how did you find people that were not afraid of butterflies? I didn't think about that, but I guess some people can be afraid of butterflies.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, I honestly, it's funny. I never vetted people based on their fear of butterflies, which I probably should have done. But we had a lovely lady named Kathleen who helped us with casting. And so we found our actors. They were both SAG actors. And we held casting auditions, and I just fell in love with both of their characters. And they have a really interesting collaboration on screen. And so in our first few sessions together, it was clear that these were the two guys we needed.
Oh, good. And obviously, when you went through their auditions, you had to ask them if they were all right working with butterflies, I guess.
A little bit, and then I think always I try to, anything I'm going to ask someone else to do, I'm going to do myself. So of course, I came over, oh, this is our butterfly, they're not going to harm you. And everybody, I think once they, held the butterfly, understood.
In terms of, I'm going to follow up on that question that person asked. In terms of casting, did you actually have to cast butterflies? Were you looking for specific types of butterflies or just accepted what was sent to you?
I accepted what was sent to me. Yeah, no SAG butterfly representation, best I know. But no, like I said, I just ordered it. They were intended for a wedding. But yeah, they were stars. I couldn't have cast it better.
Well, good. What would you do differently? Is there anything you would do differently, have done differently in this film?
Sure. I think as an artist, and I'm sure others out there will relate, that anytime you create and go back to something you've created in the past, you're seeing it through a new lens of your current experience. So I think there's always a little bit of like, oh, 2020 is 2020, you have 2020 hindsight, but there's always an element of I could improve this now, I have more tools now. So personally, yes, there's a certain poeticism that was lost in translating the original text, which I encourage you all to check out, by Samantha Schweblin. She just has a really poetic language, and it was really hard to put those poetics into the film, and how to translate those things without necessarily making it a voiceover. So in hindsight, I would have loved to have done some more work like that, and I would have loved a couple of drone shots and this kind of thing, but so it goes.
Okay, well, good. Another question we have coming in is, did you shoot this on a real set or a fake set? I guess, was it a real location
Or a
or
soundstage.
a soundstage? Yes.
Copy that. It was real location. Funny enough, one of our producers named Rob knew this elementary school as he had gone there. And so through personal connections, he reached out to the school location, and they were really sweet with us and allowed us to film on site. This would have been in Syosset, New York. And so, yeah, we were on location in real life, IRL.
Well, good. Okay, I kind of thought it was in real life. Another question we have is, why did you add the part about the tooth fairy?
Interesting. The tooth fairy, I think, is a real symbol of innocence, and it's kind of interesting. A lot of the characterization of that parent is kind of how his arrogance and stuff, and so I think it's interesting in a magical realist universe to hear him speak about it in that way, and then to have something so fantastic and magical happen. Kind of interconnects those ideas a little bit. But the tooth fairy, yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
Great
All
question.
right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, some really, really good
Really great
questions.
questions.
It is. And uh, just to just to build upon that, I guess at the end we saw that the school was kind of empty of the butterflies or the children, if we want to interpret it that way. What was the meaning behind that in terms of showing the empty school?
I think growing up, I was never a big fan of school, although school is wonderful and learning is wonderful, and everyone should always have that sense of wanting to learn more. But growing up, school was always difficult, and I think a lot of people feel that way. So, in a sense of escaping and freedom, it was very much like a liberation that that all these kids were able to escape the institution. Yeah, now it's yeah.
Right, that makes sense. And my interpretation of it is, I know you didn't ask, no one asked, but I want to just
I'd
give
love
it
to hear.
anyway,
Please.
is that, the whole symbolic reference with butterflies, people get butterflies in their stomach. These nervous feelings, and that happens a lot in school. And now that you're out of school, you don't have these butterflies in your stomach, butterflies in the school anymore. So it's just a
That's
little
great. I
twist I
love
put
that.
on that.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think it
Okay.
fits. Perfect.
Good. Oh, so what's coming up next for you? You've been making films. Well, what are you working on next? What should we look for?
Thank you for asking. Yes, I'm producing 2 short films right now. It's a little bit difficult to do any production stuff, as you can imagine, during this time. But there are small things happening, and there are definitely animation things happening. So I'm producing 2 animated projects, and I'm also working on a feature development deal. We'll see how that goes, but yeah, kind of waiting for quarantine to ease up a little bit before we're gonna go back into production, I think. But 2 or 3 projects on the horizon that I'm very excited about.
Very during this quarantine time, you're able to do a lot of research and development, writing, or what are you able to do?
Exactly so. It's a great time to develop projects as nothing's really moving. So it's a good time for me to prepare, get all my eggs in, in a line, however you want to say it. And yeah, and then once we get to a different place, I think the execution should happen pretty quickly now that I've been able to develop for so long.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. I'm glad you're able to take some time out of your schedule to talk to us about this film. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you would like to say about this film, or just in general about the meaning to this film that can help students like grow, maybe just
Sure.
as a teenager?
Sure. Gosh, I'll try to give whatever I can. Well, thank you all for your time. Firstly, thank you, Eric. Really appreciate this. Thank you, everyone who's watching. In terms of a message, I just say these are difficult times for everybody, and that, please know I may never meet you or know you personally, but that I love you and that I hope that you're well and I wish you well. And to be mindful that we are interconnected in this way. I think that Mariposas really was trying to put this idea of how we interrelate with nature and that we are all connected. So be good to each other, be good to yourselves, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you. We'd like to thank our special guest, Adrian Carey, Director of Mariposas, for joining us today. And we'd like to thank you, our audience, for for watching today and for your questions. And for more information about the upcoming 45th Cleveland International Film Festival, please continue to follow CIFF on social media and visit clevelandfilm.org. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Eric Siler.